The views and opinions expressed by participants in the following public affairs program do not necessarily reflect the position or beliefs of WDEF or its staff.
Since 1954, this is Point of View, the world record-holding public affairs program produced at the studios of WDEF-TV Chattanooga and with underwriting community support.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Point of View. At some point in most of our lives, we will have the designation or the title of ex or former. It doesn't mean anything bad, because in order to be an ex or former, you have to do something to deserve present. And that's part of what we'd like to talk about today. What is it like to run for and win office, and then you're out of office? What is it like to run for and not quite get there, but maybe you're prepared to do that again? We'd like to talk with two guests today. Melanie Sakari, thank you very much for joining us. We'll talk about your run for Congress, and then another face that most of you are very familiar with over the years in many capacities. Moses Freeman, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
We appreciate it. And Naira Consell, we've talked about being exes and what have you in life.
Correct.
And then interviewing people like ourselves. Listen, ex-anchorman from Boston, ex-talk show host, medical field, et cetera, ex-informer. But when you look at our two guests here today, when we talk about the word ex, how does that strike you?
You know, I think that once you do an impact for the community, that is a ripple effect. Whether you were present or not present, whether you were voted in or not voted in, or decided to run again or not again.
So what's been the biggest change for you? You had your constituency in your hands and in your heart, but now you don't have them in your hands. How are you making this transition psychologically and emotionally?
Oh, I guess I really do not see a transition in the sense that I just do not represent them on the city council as far as making governmental decisions as that go. But as far as the relationship that I have to my friends who live within the district, particularly those who live immediately around me, we're still members of the same neighborhood association. A lot of us are still members of the same church. A lot of us are still members of the same organizations in the neighborhood. So we still see each other on a regular basis, and we still relate to one another. And so life is just back to normal. For me, it's a relief that I do not have to represent and do things for the entire city. I was only elected to serve as a district representative, but I was actually serving the entire city of Chattanooga and not just the district.
But there's another part to this. It's a country and western song, and it says, when the phone don't ring, you know it's me. Yeah. Your phone doesn't ring like that anymore, does it?
No, not totally. It does not ring like that. And I'm happy that it does not ring like that anymore. That's the good news, is that it does not ring.
But Melanie, your phone continues to ring because we're calling you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I came back to Chattanooga and ran. I met a lot of people very quickly, and so I joke that I really can't go into Walgreens without seeing someone I know these days. So I am pretty much always still made up, presentable. I don't run in my sweats to Walgreens very often, even after having run. But I think the reason I ran had a lot to do with not seeing a lot of ex-young people in our community, not having a lot of young people stepping up to the plate to run, or people from different backgrounds, and I wanted to see more of that, and I think we will see more of that, and I'm getting a lot more people identifying themselves to me, which is great, because then I can use that to maybe help develop a training program or work with other women in our community that want to see more women running for office. So the work doesn't end.
You brought up a great point, and that's younger people, the younger generations, maybe some millennials or even some Generation X, people that are younger. How do you think that meshes well in politics with the older generation, or maybe the baby boomers?
I think I was apprehensive when I started that older people might be more judgmental about my qualifications, they might be more skeptical, and really I think I got welcomed with arms wide open, especially from older folks that thought we're ready for the next generation to start kind of taking the reins on some of these issues. And so,
Moses, how do you feel about the mesh of different generations in politics?
I think when you get down to the issues, they both are on the same side. There's not a distinguishing difference between the youth and the other, except in that they have different perspectives that they come to, but they both have the same principles on the issue, is whether it's going to serve them and the community in the same. Is it a right decision that you're making? Is it going to serve the community at large? Can they both agree on the principles of the issue?
Well, let's talk about the speed for the principles of the issue. Well, let's go fast, let's go slow. Younger people want to go faster. Older people want to be more measured, supposedly. Is that true or not?
I think that's true. I think it's true because of the financing. I think oftentimes the financing is that which is paid for by older people who are paying taxes on home ownership property that they own. As a result, they are the higher taxpayers within the community, and the younger people are not at that level where they're paying taxes as yet on the property, and therefore they don't seem to see that side of the equation when you make decisions.
I won't disagree with that. I also think that we just grew up in a different generation. The generation that I came from, I remember not having computers, and I remember the time when we did have computers. And back in the day, you had to know a lot more to get information. Now we can read and look up a lot more very quickly, and so that might contribute to trying to make assessments on a shorter time frame. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we need both, and it balances each other out. I know you had a really good relationship with former Councilman Anderson, who's quite a bit of an age difference with you, and it didn't seem to hinder your working together on the council. So
I had a great relationship with a lot of young people within the district and throughout the city, and I enjoyed that relationship with them, and it invigorated me to have a relationship with young people in the community a lot of times. In fact, I think that they made a significant part of the core of the people who supported me.
Well, then what happened? What happened? Someone else came along and said, listen, I'm the new bright, shiny thing.
Well, I don't think that's what happened. I think they began to look deeper at my background and began to see me as someone who had been in government for an overextended period of time. And it was on that basis they decided that they maybe needed to look at new and fresher faces to be in government.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So with that thought in mind, are you now in favor of term limits?
I've always been in favor of term limits.
Except for you, because
no,
you kept running, right?
No. That's the whole misconception. I had never ran for city council but one time.
Oh, that's right.
And most people think that I had been. No, I had never been appointed either. Most people think that I had been an elected official in the city of Chattanooga for the last 40 years, but I have only served one term, and that was the last 4 years when I became an elected official at the age of 75, not at the age of 55 or 40, but most people think that I had been an elected official since 35, when I was 35, and that was a misconception that everybody had of me because I had a wealth of experience and I had been a civic engagement person. I've been involved in river bend, mental health. There's not an issue in the community that I had not been involved in since I was a teacher in high school,
so they
back
just saw
at
you
21 or 22 years of age,
your name had
because
been out
I had been in every major function in the city of Chattanooga.
Let's move
forever.
on with this one.
Yes, you were obviously a community activist, like many people in our community, trying to do an impact for the positive.
A professional volunteer.
Professional volunteer, as many of us are in a lot of aspects. In a lot of aspects.
That's why this show is here.
Exactly, and there's a lot of more diversity than there has been in the past. How do you think that impacts our community now? Diversity in politics, that is.
I don't think we've really seen
Right.
a lot of movement, and that's why I get really worried. It's part of the reason I'm not running next year. We have to start pulling more people into the process and getting them actually elected. It's not enough to just get, and I say this about women in particular, to get nonprofit positions for the most part. I feel like in business and in politics, there's still significant barriers to women. I'll include people of color in this city. You know, we have a lot of barriers, maybe unseen, kind of invisible barriers to them getting actually elected to office. And I'm a data person, so I look at the numbers, and you know, we had an additional woman this year and a person of color. That's amazing, but that's not a lot of progress over the last, and we've gone backwards in some years.
One of the things that I see that the Democrats and the progressives are starting to look at a little bit more is that you have to have a bench. You have to have someone that has already been trained. Each one bring one, each one teach one. It seems that's the path that you're on.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a different, I see it totally different. There are a lot of advocate groups. There are a lot of voices for different and specific subject issues, but there's no coalescing of those ideas and those groups and those functions together. They still are individualized
Citywide or
function.
statewide?
They are singularly function.
Citywide or statewide?
Citywide, statewide, nationally. Everybody has their own silo. The environmentalists function only as environmentalists. Those who are pressing as advocates of race only function on racial matters. They have no issues on environment. Those who function on the question of poverty have no other issue other than poverty.
But when you were in office, you had a
coalesce with other
when you were in
people.
office, you had a select group that you coalesced with. This is basically what you're saying
not when I was
that you did.
When I was, the whole movement
I have to remind
started.
you, I'm not cutting you off, but we only have a minute to go.
I want to ask one. I want to go back to something Melanie said, and that is, in some ways, we have gone backwards. What are those ways?
We had more women in certain, on the commission and in city council in the past. I think a couple of years ago it was up to 3 or 4 women on the council, and since then it has gone down to 1, and then now we're back up to 2. So the number varies over time. Obviously, the quality of the person matters, but there's a difference between advocating on the outside and having someone on the inside that's willing to listen to that. And I think you need both. You have to have your outside advocacy groups, and you have to have willing and open ideas and backgrounds on the governing councils to bring those perspectives.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up this section. Moses Freeman, want to thank you very much for being with us. Melanie, as always. Naira, we have a new segment that's coming up. We'll be talking to another gentleman who also ran. He didn't quite make it, but he has some interesting takes on what might happen if and when. That and more when Point of View continues.
I've got a job to do today.
I've got a job to do today.
Have a good first day at work, Mom.
Your donations to Goodwill fund job training programs right in your community.
Feels good to start fresh, right?
Sure does.
And like that, you're a job creator.
Thank you very much for continuing with us on this edition of Point of View, where we are talking about the names and phrases exes and former. What's it like to be a former candidate? Win or lose? Well, we're talking with Dennis Clark, Melanie Sakari. Ruth Carter Hickman is here with me this afternoon. We'll continue our conversation. We'll start back with you first. Dennis, what office did you run for and why did you do it?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me back on Point of View. It's always a pleasure to be with all of you. I was a candidate for the Tennessee State Representative for the 28th Legislative District, and it's really simple. When you run for office, it's evoking the whole democratic process and giving people an alternative or choice to make a better decision, to have better results in their community. So that's why I ran for office.
Oh, you could do it better.
Oh, absolutely. And I say that because the community can be better. And that's when people like Melanie and I, or even incumbents who run again, we all run with the hope that we can do something better, but it's also to give the people a choice to choose the better.
But what better ideas did you have?
Right, and so, and that's usually the catch-22 when you ask. That's the question we get all the time. Well, what did you do? What have you done? What my simple answer to that is that we live in the community and we live these issues. We see what's not being done and what could be done, and all we're saying is that give us an opportunity to do it better, because like Maurice always talks about, this term limits. If you don't like what I do, the people have a choice to go back to the polls to vote you in or to vote you back out. But as far as our records, when we step up to the plate to ask people to choose us, we come with qualifications in being community activists. You know, both of us are community activists. We advocate for certain issues of education, crime. We serve on nonprofit boards. We're business owners. And so we have the capacity and the abilities that we bring to the table and to the ballot, that where people can say, okay, he has the skill set to maybe do something better.
So Melanie, when you looked at the issues that were out there when you first decided to run, now here you are, the election is over, you didn't make it that particular time, but now you're trying to develop a crop of new people. So what's out there that still needs to be fixed? And where do you want to start?
Congressional level?
Right.
Well, what I'm discovering more and more is that at every level, we really have to be vigilant on getting better representatives and better decisions. For example, the healthcare issue. Everybody talks about it on the national scale. Well, what about at the State House, where they have control over whether we take federal funds and whether we expand Medicaid or not? What about at the local level that governs our health departments? Healthcare is a big one because we know that things are constantly happening with that. But the focus that I want people to have on is the state level. That state level right now, power has really consolidated at the state level. And we have representatives in every district, like Dennis ran in. And we need to hold those people accountable, and they get by on elections about as much as congressional candidates do.
But do people really want to think that much?
I'm really looking into ways to make it easier for them, because in my mind, it's not a desire to want to understand or not. It's so complicated, the way that we have set it up. I don't know how a normal person that has regular things going on in their life can deal with the number of levels we have, the number of elections, 3 in 2018 that we are electing 3 times that you need to go to the ballot in order to vote, and then keeping all the candidates straight. I mean, there are some people that probably thought Dennis and I ran against each other. We're like, no. So we'd be very clear in our speeches, I'm not running against Dennis. You can vote for both of us if you like us.
How do we break it down and make it simple for people to understand?
Looking into that, there's the literature is talking about gamification, and in Seattle they had a really interesting problem with their mayoral candidates. They had 21 candidates for an open mayoral seat. So they actually had a game released by a publication, and it was you put in your priorities and then they tell you which one you are most closely aligned with.
Wow.
And I think that really opens up the idea of A, you're not 100% like any candidate, and B, you don't need to know about them, you can know about yourself and then match up and kind of see where you fall in those areas.
I like the fact that you're mentioning education, because that's really a hot issue here. I talked to Representative Joanne Favors a little bit today, and she was saying, listen, one of the critical issues that we need to talk about what's happening with the schools and the education. Where are you two guys on that?
Well, I believe we need education reform. It's one of those things where the proof is in the pudding.
But there's a plan out now to actually do something. Where are you on that?
Right, and I'm for the partnership district. You know, there's 2 options. The state either takes over the schools district, the schools that are failing or underperforming in its entirety, or there's an option to where the county still has, our local Hamilton County Board of Education still has somewhat of a say in how that partnership is formed, all in a strategy to get our low-performing schools performing at competitive levels throughout the state.
But just briefly, the state representative controls the money that comes into Hamilton County.
Absolutely. You know,
that's the
only part of it.
Okay.
You know, actually the county commission has the most power in terms of raising funds and raising tax levels, even with inflation. So in my mind, the iZone schools are one particular issue, but overall, the business analysis that was done recently by a lot of really respected people said we just do not have enough money to even get the minimum and to make those infrastructure changes happen. And the current commission has said, no, we are not going to raise taxes at all for any reason. Doesn't matter what happens to the kids in our school system. And I think that that is fundamentally wrong, that we need people that are going to make tough decisions, not the easy ones that get you elected every time. Because, you know, we know the last time they increased taxes, a lot of people lost their position. And I admire them for making the tough choice, because if we don't have taxes pegged to inflation, we are losing money every single year.
But isn't that hard to do when they can't even select a superintendent?
That's a good point.
See, now there you go, putting the facts in the game.
Well, you know, going back to what, and it's all over the place. You know, we need a revival in education.
But just stick with that one for a minute, though.
Well, I mean, you know, again, it's a civics lesson. This is what frustrates me in this county, in this city, is that no one understands the order of operations when it comes to who's the funding body or who's that person's funding body. And the deal is that regardless if we have a superintendent, he has no oversight in what happens with the underperforming schools. His job is a day-to-day operational chief to make sure that there's the academic structure that's happening, the instructional level, and there's just the day-to-day operations of transportation, you know, all these other different things. But education is regulated by federal and state government, even what we get from the county. Like with the BEP formula, that comes from the state level.
What's the BEP formula?
Well, it's the basic education, I forgot what the P stands for, but it's basically how they determine, based on your county size or how many students you have in your county, how much money you get from the state. And that is completely regulated by our governor and by state representatives, even all the way up to the federal level. So again, it's the civics lessons that I think sometimes as candidates, we have to not only talk about ourselves, but then we have to educate the general public about.
Well, one of the things is that neither of you are Republicans.
That's right.
So let's talk about swimming upstream, okay?
You know, I've seen a lot of, and there's a couple of groups out of Nashville have made a lot of progress. I think partisan politics only get you so far, and there are ways to make relationships and to make things happen. I don't think you have to elect the people that represent you necessarily. I think you need to have representatives that will listen to all perspectives.
That's right.
And we have seen multiple elected officials say, I'm sorry, you're not a member of my party, you don't matter. And that to me, I don't care, and I said this when I was on the job, I don't care who you are, if the majority elects me, I serve all of you. And we don't have that, that principle in a lot of our elected officials' minds, and so they like to dismiss. And that to me is like the #1 sin, running away from your constituents, not answering their calls and messages, not showing your face in town hall meetings, that kind of stuff really, it's less about the decision and it's about what you're doing to really hear all the voices in your district.
Which is why I think we've had a lot of incumbents lose at every level, from the county level, not quite at the state level yet, but you're seeing this ripple effect of people who are saying, you know what, I don't hear from you, I don't know what you're doing, I don't see you being vocal or active on certain issues that matter to me. And so we've seen this in this county, turnover.
Well, Ruth, you mentioned earlier that there seems to be some anger out there against politicians.
Yeah, I mean, just by watching what's going on in our media, like, you know, the shooting that just took place, you know, you can't even play basketball without gun violence, you know, going on. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
We're like,
no, it's horrible.
It's horrible.
There's no excuse for it, and I'm really upset that it's starting to get into a partisan area where it just seems like people are upset about the political stuff and going after each other. That's not the way our system was made, and I really think we are going to have to work together on issues, and we need to kind of bring ourselves together and bring ourselves to the table. It's not happening right now, and the more we stoke it, and the more that media stokes it, and the more that we go after people that don't think like us or say negative things about them or disrespectful things about them, the worse it's going to get.
So what's the solution? Where do we start? How do we bring everybody to the table to at least have a conversation for change?
I think that's the problem. You know, politics is a competitive sport. And what people need to realize is that when we're all at the table, we're not always going to get along, but we have to respect each other. Because we do come to the table with different ideologies. You know, I don't believe in what Republicans believe in, so I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight you tooth and nail because I don't think you need to be there representing us and telling us that
my way or the highway.
yeah, my way or the highway, or 2.5 million of us want to have health insurance as a result of your decision. And so that's politics. That's the nature of politics. But you cross the line when safety becomes an issue, when Republicans or Democrats are being fired upon. But when you come to the table, it's going to be infighting. It's not going to always be peaceful. But when we leave the table, we have to leave respecting each other and getting stuff done.
What's happening in Washington today? Is it filtering down to the mood of the people here in Chattanooga and the metropolitan area? Melanie?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are really concerned. Obviously, one of our representatives was there, and that's really concerning.
Absolutely.
I think running for office is, it might seem like a decision we just made, but I had threats on social media, and that was something I always thought about because I was an other. I think a lot of people who are others that run for office really think about that. At the same time, we talked about the fact that there are kids in our community that deal with gun violence every single day. And they were talking about a 10-year-old that was there. Well, there was an 8-year-old that was shot in an unrelated incident, not even a week ago. And so I think putting some perspective on that, yes, it was something that was unique for them, but for some people in our community, it's not unique at all.
Yeah. In less than 10 seconds, what's the most positive thing that you want to accomplish?
The most positive thing
seconds.
I want to accomplish is inspiring other people to be bold and to be courageous and to do things people say you can't do.
Melanie, quickly.
I want to empower other people to take decisions into their own hands.
Ruth, you and I will be back again next week. We want to thank our two guests for being with us today. But next week, we'll be talking about what is it like to travel at more than 200 miles per hour, and then the technology that's in that vehicle may wind up in your new Chevy. Join us for the next Point of View.
Closed captioning provided by the following.
Funding for this program is brought to you by Barnett & Company, specializing in tax-efficient strategies for the preservation and distribution of family wealth, offering continuous investment management with a focus on long-term strategies. Areas of service include investment, estate, education, and retirement planning. Barnett & Company, the power of compound returns over time. More information can be found on the web at barnettandcompany.com.